So, I was just flipping through my feed as always, because I have that kind of time. And I come across Ronny, True Empiricism, aka TrueTalkTv, his recent video about Hemant Mehta, or the Atheist Voice. His recent reply video to something he'd recently done, and it's like Atheist Voice refuted. And after watching it, well, let's just say nothing was refuted, so I felt like I needed to make a video. So, without any further ado, let us begin.
How should we respond to the phrase, "It takes more faith to be an atheist"?
Well, before you respond, you should definitely step back, listen, and make sure you understand why the theist is saying this.
Have you ever heard Christian apologists use that line, "It takes more faith to be an atheist"? The thinking here is that atheists are making bigger assumptions than religious people have to make, as if accepting the Big Bang and evolution is somehow fantastical.
See, you responded before you understood. I mean, this is obvious because had you understood, you would have realized that one, evolution can only take effect after life is already established. So you're confusing more so evolution with abiogenesis.
See, you responded before you understood, and you decided to actually just put words into his mouth instead of actually responding to what he had said. The point was he was trying to make was that evolution and the Big Bang Theory were just really examples. He was not conflating abiogenesis and evolution. That it is something that creationists tend to do. I'm not saying you do, but it is a trick that seems to happen a lot with creationists. And so you just decided, maybe that's what he's trying to say. Well, no, see, unlike many creationists, Hemant actually understands there is no conflation between abiogenesis and evolution.
As to whether or not evolution is true or untrue has no effect on your position of atheism or being an atheist. Because what is atheism? Atheism means to be without theism.
Ronny, you always try and do this. You always try and redefine atheism as without theism. So please explain to me what an atheist is. Are they without theists? Obviously not. Atheist comes from the Greek word atheos, which means without gods. Please quit trying to redefine the word atheism because it works better with your little script.
Theism is the belief in a creator behind the influence of the universe that intervenes or is interactive.
There you go again, Ronny, redefining terms to better fit your needs. Theism simply means belief in God or gods. Sometimes those gods may be creator gods, sometimes they are not. You can believe in gods that are not necessarily creator gods.
The second thing is the implications of the Big Bang. Well, the implications of the Big Bang are more friendly for a theistic or deistic or position or anybody believe that there was a start for these things because these things are implicating a start.
That is a mighty bold assertion that you're making there, Ronny, considering that all of the physicists and the people that understand quantum mechanics and all the scientists that are busy observing the edge of our observable universe and all of these people that have a better grasp on all this stuff better than we do. The overwhelming majority of those people do not believe in some sort of intelligent design and still assume that it's likely a natural universe. However, they all seem to agree that it is far too soon to really make a truth claim of which one it really is because we are still very ignorant of the universe. They all seem to think that, but yet you seem to believe that all of the evidence points toward an intelligent designer and that it's so clear? Sure, let's go with that.
But I think that the implications of the Big Bang itself and the mathematical improbabilities of it happening the way non-intention are very clearly more in favor for our position.
This is just another example of a rebranding of the whole, what are the odds that the universe could come about by a random chance or non-intentional, as Ronny likes to put it. So let me ask you this, Ronny. What are the odds of an omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, supernatural, non-corporeal entity that exists outside of space and time that decides to create an entire universe filled with millions and billions of galaxies and planets and stars and decides to create one bunch of people on one little planet and then after several thousand years brings his own son, which is actually himself, out of the two out of the Trinity, and he would live down here on earth and then die and then resurrect? What are the odds of all of that coming to pass, Can you give me some stats on that? Can you give me the probabilities?
So the fact that you're using this as sort of a protest that we that theists they don't agree with this because it's some sort of problem that takes more faith. No. I don't really think that you're understanding what you're saying, because this would be a very lousy excuse to give to us, being that nobody that actually understands about these topics as a theist would actually use these as an attack against atheism. So more so, your approach is an approach towards a lack of understanding towards the theist side, because I don't think anybody who actually knows about these things would actually use these as a protest.
The very first half of this segment, I have no idea what Ronny was getting at, but towards the end, though, he started to kind of put it together that, a true, or not a true theist, a theist that understands these things wouldn't make that kind of argument. However, as I'm going to show in a second, Ronny just completely cuts off Hemant right in the middle of his sentence, so people don't really, so his response is quite skewed. And secondly, there are theists that make this position all of the time. So just by saying there aren't theists that the smarter theists or whatever wouldn't say those things doesn't mean that there aren't theists that don't say that.
But believing that Jesus rose from the dead makes perfect sense.
This little segment you just watched is the conclusion to what Hemant Mehta was trying to say before Ronny cut him off. So now I'm going to play the whole thing for you so you can actually understand what Hemant Mehta is actually trying to say.
As if accepting the Big Bang and evolution is somehow fantastical, but believing that Jesus rose from the dead makes perfect sense.
If you were paying attention to that minute or so rambling of Ronny's a little bit earlier, where the first half of it didn't really make any sense, and the last half of it was just him just talking about how theists wouldn't make that argument. Ones that actually know what they're talking about wouldn't make that argument. The problem is, Ronny cut Hemant Mehta off in the middle of his statement, so we don't even know what it was his position was until afterwards, when Ronny would let him finish talking. So we can see how disingenuous this is, because Ronny doesn't even bother actually addressing the point that Hemant Mehta makes here.
Even though all the evidence we've ever had points to the Big Bang and evolution, and as far as I know, there's no evidence for zombies.
I also want to point out that right here, Hemant Mehta is talking about there's no evidence for Jesus and things like that, there's more evidence for evolution and things, but Ronny doesn't even try to defend it. So this would be a brilliant tactic on Ronny's part if he were to actually address the concern that there's a lack of evidence for Jesus or his resurrection, but yet he doesn't. I wonder why.
I mean, pretty much every atheist is not saying there is no God. We know we don't have that sort of perfect evidence. We're saying we looked at the evidence and we don't believe God exists. And there is a difference between those two.
You see, the problem is from this side, from the theist side, what we see on YouTube from the atheist community is a very dogmatic approach. We see these semantical duck and dodge games where atheists are saying, well, they just disbelieve or have a lack of belief in a God.
The problem here is, Ronny, you're trying so hard to put us all into one bucket and then redefining atheism to fit your needs that we have to stop and tell you, no, that is not my position. That is not how I see things. We are not ducking and dodging. We're just not going to let you have your specific definition because it works for you when it's not what we believe, when it's not our position.
But as they use that definition, they're more so as a very strong anti-theist, while at the same time calling themselves weak atheists. So when we see these atheists approach us, we see them making a lot of strong claims and assertions that are more so online with religious behavior. But when they're being called out on this nonsense, they are more so using these definitions dishonestly.
It is true that you will come across some strong atheists that will generally make the claim it is true that there is no gods, and you'll come across more weak atheists to say that I do not believe in God, or I don't believe there are any gods. They will strongly and adamantly may tell you that your evidence is wrong, and they may tell you that you don't have any evidence and you may this is wrong or this claim is wrong, but it doesn't mean that they're strong atheists, and you're kind of conflating the two. You're conflating their behavior in defense of their beliefs with dogmatic, behaviors, and you're just kind of mixing it all together and trying to lump them into one bucket, as I described earlier.
And second, you don't have to look everywhere to dismiss a really silly idea. If you tell me there's an invisible unicorn flying around my head right now, I don't need to look around and look up to make sure that's the case. I can just hear you out and say, that sounds like a really crazy idea. The onus is on you to prove your silly idea, not on me to dismiss it.
Okay, according to the Atheist Voice, through the subjectivity of your doubts because you think that something is silly, you shouldn't look at it objectively and look into it because, that's just silly to you. Well,
being that we are subjective beings, I would like to know how Ronny thinks we're supposed to look into things objectively.
yeah, if it doesn't make sense to you, of course, I guess scientists, physicists, we should stop looking into quantum mechanics and dealing with these particles that appear to be at more than one place at the same time. This is going to throw out the issue, the very promising future advancement of quantum computers that will completely revolutionize modern society. So, which position is holding back modern society and science again?
The position that is going to hold back our advancement in technology is the one that asserts that the universe exists because of a supernatural, non-corporeal, spaceless, timeless entity, and then attempts to back up that position with no empirical or observable evidence, which is the very foundation of the scientific method which allows for advancement in technology to begin with. And as far as this invisible unicorn business, what you don't seem to understand is that there's a difference between not immediately accepting an invisible unicorn and accepting that it's most likely not true because of what we understand about unicorns and the likelihood of people being mistaken or lying, and the field of quantum mechanics, which actually has empirical data and observation and scores of papers written about it that we can accept that exists. There is a difference between something that doesn't make sense to us, such as quantum mechanics, with something that is most likely known to be false, such as invisible unicorns. Hemant Mehta was by no means saying that just because there's something that we don't understand, that we should write it off as silly and useless, and you goddamn know well better than that. I know that you're being completely disingenuous with that statement, because I know that you're not stupid enough to actually believe that's what he said. And you want to say that atheists are the most trusted group. You are a fucking hypocrite!
Ultimately, you being without theism, the belief of a creator behind these things, is ultimately a perception of reality that is without my perception of reality.
You say that my perception of reality doesn't have your perception of reality. Well, so the fuck what? I don't have the Pope's perception of reality. I don't have my mom's perception of reality. I know somebody that's a synesthesiast. That means they can see colors when they're hearing sounds. I don't have their perception of reality. I don't have my dog's perception of reality, and he doesn't really see reds and greens very well because he's a dog. Does that mean that I don't know things about red and green, or I can't make assumptions or claims about colors? So the fuck what if I don't have your perception of reality? When it comes to looking for truth, it's not our perception of reality which leads us to the objective truth that you're looking for.
So anything that you would be explaining would be without my particular perception. And when we are having a discussion, we are to contrast both of the things that we have to offer in a rational, logical sense to see which one is more rational and coherent. If by your position, your stance, from what you're saying towards the end, I don't have to disprove anything, I don't have to say anything, well, then you're basically by admission saying that even if I were to present a rational, logical case, how would you react towards me? You don't have to say anything in response. You don't have to deal with the ramifications of your position as to whether or not it's rational, You see, just because you say that you just disbelieve does not mean that your particular perception of reality or your rejection of a perception of reality is logical, rational, or coherent.
Just because we do not have the burden of proof doesn't mean that when we get into a discussion, which is by, general definition a kind of a two-way thing, that, we're just going to just sit there and wait for the evidence. We're going to not just sit back and wait and let you just talk and talk and talk and talk. We're going to tell you why we don't believe in the particular evidence that you have, and we're going to bring up our own positions, our own understandings, our own reasonings that we've come across. So I don't understand where you're getting this thought that an atheist, when they say that we don't believe and that we don't have the burden of proof, we're just kind of, we're being lazy about it. We don't have any reason to respond. It's just simply not true. I've never met an atheist that has ever said that. Please point me out one that does this.
Which perception of reality is more consistent with what we observe?
A very true statement. I absolutely agree, Ronny. What is most coherent and most consistent with what we observe? What is most consistent? Well, things that we can actually prove with empirical data, and ones that can make predictions and help us understand the world around us. Very natural understanding of the world. Those are the things that reflect and help us, are most coherent and most consistent with the world around us. A supernatural, non-corporeal, spaceless, timeless entity is not so consistent with the way that we see the world. So yeah, that's a very good question.
Fantastical.
See, you responded before you understood. I mean, this is obvious because had you understood, you would have realized that one, evolution can only take effect after life is already established. So you're confusing more so evolution with abiogenesis.
See, you responded before you understood. And you decided to actually just put words into his mouth instead of actually responding to what he had said. The point he was trying to make was that evolution and the Big Bang Theory were just really examples. He was not conflating abiogenesis and evolution. So, I was just flipping through my feed, as always, because, I have that kind of time. And I come across Ronny, True Empiricism, aka TrueTalkTv, his recent video about Hemant Mehta, or the Atheist Voice. His recent reply video to something he'd recently done, and it's like Atheist Voice refuted. And after watching it, well, let's just say nothing was refuted, so I felt like I needed to make a video. So, without any further ado, let us begin.
How should we respond to the phrase, "It takes more faith to be an atheist"?
Well, before you respond, you should definitely step back, listen, and make sure you understand why the theist is saying this.
Have you ever heard Christian apologists use that line, "It takes more faith to be an atheist"? The thinking here is that atheists are making bigger assumptions than religious people have to make, as if accepting the Big Bang and evolution is somehow
evolution. That it is something that creationists tend to do. I'm not saying you do, but it is a trick that seems to happen a lot with creationists. And so you just decided, maybe that's what he's trying to say. Well, no, see, unlike many creationists, Hemant actually understands there is no conflation between abiogenesis and evolution.
As to whether or not evolution is true or untrue has no effect on your position of atheism or being an atheist, because what is atheism? Atheism means to be without theism.
Ronny, you always try and do this. You always try and redefine atheism as without theism. So please explain to me what an atheist is. Are they without theists? Obviously not. Atheist comes from the Greek word atheos, which means without gods. Please quit trying to redefine the word atheism because it works better with your little script.
Theism is the belief in a creator behind the influence of the universe that intervenes or is interactive.
There you go.